Alright, you gonna be nice to me this time? No outbursts? No rebellion? No orange cat brain cell moments? Good. Good. Game development, like any creatively driven medium, is not an easy task, nor is it a time-friendly one. They can take anywhere from a weekend to 8 years to create, and the success and stability is sadly never guaranteed. Sometimes a developer's vision is too ambitious for the capabilities of their team. Sometimes it was well within their capabilities, but the game was missing that special sauce to really break through the mold and find an audience. And sometimes what they promise might look amazing on paper, but in practice it stinks like an open carton of 3-week-old milk. For better or for worse, when it comes to video games, there's really only one way to find out which way the monkey swings, and that is for you to play and experience the games for yourself. Black Myth Wukong was one of those games that had been in development for a while, a whole whopping 6 years of it, and over those years, we had seen glimpses of it in short demo videos, but we never really got a full picture of it. I remember when I saw the announcement trailer back in 2020, and the first thing that caught my eye was the art direction of the game. It looked absolutely incredible, with all sorts of weird and creepifying creatures that could really only come from mythology, and it was set up in a combat system that looked like if the Norse God of War games had a baby with Bloodborne, so naturally it became affectionately referred to as Monkey Souls. I know, sounds basically perfect on paper. While the visuals looked stunning, the gameplay from what I saw left a little to be desired. It didn't exactly look like it was breaking the mold or anything, and in all honesty, it looked pretty slow, with boss health bars that seemed almost titanic. Bullet sponges and slower paced combat is not exactly the most enticing way to sell an action game. Just look at the reaction people had to Dark Souls 2. However, as with all games, what may look boring, monotonous, and excruciatingly slow in a demo may actually be one of the most engaging systems ever created once you actually get your hands on the controller to play. And y'all are listening to me, a guy who despises turn-based combat yet was actually able to enjoy the original Final Fantasy VII and who is unbelievably hyped for Expedition 33. I am praying to God that it comes to PS5 because sweet baby J, I don't think my classic Xbox One or PC can handle that game.
Wish granted!
The other reason that I had my eye on Black Myth Wukong for the past 4 years is that it's a game that takes a lot of inspiration from Dragon Ball Z.
Man, what the?
I mean Journey to the West. And if y'all have popped into any of my streams, you know how much of a monkey man I am, so when I saw there was a full-on monkey game, I immediately kept track of it. So that brings us to where we are today, hot off the presses of my very first playthrough of Black Myth Wukong, a playable Journey through the West from first-time developer Game Science. For the purposes of this video, there's going to be as little comparisons to any other games as possible. While I was playing, there were many points where I noticed similarities to the games it was taking inspiration from, as the game wears its inspirations on its sleeve, which is honestly a good thing because for me, while I do love when developers take chances and innovate completely, I also don't get mad when the game I played ends up reminding me of another game I also played, especially when the games I get reminded of were absolute certified hood classics. So when I was reminded of other games during my first playthrough, that is where I will bring them up, and that is the only way I will bring them up. As always, I don't really see the need to compare Wukong to any games it reminded me of and see which one is better because, well, why must we act like two legends cannot coexist? And also that these are still two different games with two different aims. I don't particularly care about whether or not Black Myth Wukong objectively has better systems than God of War or Bloodborne or vice versa. I care about whether or not the systems presented to me are perfect for the experience the devs want me to have. Another thing to clarify, the title of this video means first impressions in every sense of the word, and is not and should not be treated as a full review of the game. I did not complete or engage with every aspect of the game at the time of completing it. I refuse to take my medicine. These are just my first impressions from my very first playthrough, and because of that, there might be bosses, quests, story bits, and even some endgame items, and definitely any new game plus pieces of content that are missing from this video, because unfortunately, I didn't find them all, or they just didn't stick out to me in any meaningful way. The reason I'm trying this out is because I want to give y'all a better sense of what the game could be like on a first-time raw playthrough, and I think it could be pretty fun to see how my playthrough differed from any of y'all's if you have played the game. Did we have the same confusions about the story? Did we have the same feelings about the game when we reached certain points? Did we struggle on the same bosses? Was there a segment of the game we struggled on together? Or am I just the greatest gamer to ever live and everyone else has a skill issue? Wouldn't be the first time I'm just better than everyone. And of course, does this first time experience sound like something you would find fun and want to experience for yourself? The sky is really the limit with this format, so I hope y'all like it and enjoy. And with all that out of the way, let's see what the first impressions are for this band of rookie devs on Zero's journey to the West. The gameplay of Wukong kicks off with a bang. I began by checking the terms of service to make sure I didn't spout off any feminist propaganda while playing and reviewing the game. Then, after I signed my soul and free will to China, a totally worthy price to pay for 40 hours of escapism, I went and experienced a semi-linear boss rush that had some of the most fun and satisfying highs. Get his arm! Grab his dick and twist it! And some of the most infuriating lows of any game I've ever played. I'm actually going to kick this off with the lows first because I like to end on a high note. So, bear with me for a second as I rant about the things that almost made me rage. Almost. I never rage. I'm too chill for that. Shit, boss fight! I'm also going to try to rapid fire these as quickly as I can to get to the positives because, well, it's my video and I like looking on the bright side of life.
Life's a piece of shit when you look at it.
And so is the goddamn invisible walls in this game. Let me back. Invisible wall! Invisible wall! Are you kidding me? I've been playing platformers and open world games, dungeon crawlers, and linear and non-linear action games, and basically every game that belongs to a genre that isn't turn-based under the sun, and when I tell you that this game has the most egregious and intrusive invisible walls, it is very important to me that you know it is not hyperbole. The worst part of it is that it wouldn't actually be that much of an issue if Game Science didn't give me a jump button, but they did, and here we are. While the environment design rarely actually matches the level design right, game devs, what the hell is this? Why are you doing this? There is a space right here. Game Science. What are you doing? The main problem I have is that I was given a jump button and placed in environments where I can clearly see so many different places that I know I can explore because, I mean, well, look at it, it's right there, but then they refuse to let me go there because reasons. At first, when I came across the invisible walls in Chapter 1, they were annoying because they didn't match the environment, like, at all, but I let it slide because I assumed they were just wanting to funnel me through a tutorial. It was about as subtle as a wrecking ball, but it's understandable. Then I got to Chapter 2, and I wanted to shoot myself in the frontal lobe so I could forget that I even had a jump button. That's not the worst part of it, though. Have y'all ever played a game that you really want to replay, but there's that one level that keeps you from playing it because you don't want to go through the special hell that the developers created? Well, that's the Pagoda Jail. I don't know whose brilliant idea it was to make a timed mechanic that ignores every law of safety the game has established, but they need to be taken out back and dealt with. Every 3 minutes, the game decides it's time for a new segment of the Twilight Zone, so it lowers my health to half and brings out the Shadows of Yharnam to jump and throw me over the edge into the abyss below. But the worst part of it is that it's constantly going. The timer does not stop once you rest at a shrine. There is no escape, so I hope you enjoy jail because it really doesn't like you. To add insult to injury, this is also the only area of the game where there is no invisible walls, so prepare to fall to your death, or more likely, fall to an inconvenient health drain and long-ass walk back up the spire because checkpoints are a suggestion here. I hated this part of the game so much. The invisible walls are hardly the only problem I came across in my time with the game. Right up next on the chopping block was the armor and weapon system, and admittedly, while I did actually enjoy the system for the bonuses you could receive from them, even when it's only having 2 pieces of an equipped set, a lot of them were kind of useless because you would receive them right after fighting a boss that they would actually be really good on. It's not that big of a deal when 99% of the main bosses are not actually that hard, but it feels like a kick in the balls when I fight a snake man in the water and receive a staff and armor set that gives me bonus damage and health recovery when standing in the water, and the next environment I go to is a desert. Also, for the weapons, while it's actually awesome that some of them have skill trees and upgrade paths you can choose for different attack stat values and passive bonuses, it's really frustrating to have to pay a cost to change the staff after unlocking it for the first time. At the same time, you can't upgrade certain staffs in the skill tree any further, so there's some passive bonuses that become completely useless because their stats aren't high enough to be of any help. It's an aspect that actively works against a system that constantly encourages you to experiment. Speaking of stats, the mana and stamina bars are the biggest detractors of the game's pretty stellar combat system. Black Myth Wukong is an action game, and while it's not unheard of for an action game to have a stamina bar and mana bar so as to keep the player from just becoming a god and spamming their overpowered abilities, here these are two things that are superfluous at best and actively enraging at worst. The mana bar falls into that superfluous category, as not only do all of your spells cost mana to cast, they also have a cooldown associated with them. I couldn't help but think the entire time as I was playing that cooldowns would have been more than enough to balance this system, especially when the various parries and support spells all have cooldowns that more than get the job done. The stamina bar in the early game falls into the enraging category before it made the transition to the superfluous around chapter 3. Really, the most annoying thing it does is break up the flow in boss fights. The bosses in Black Myth Wukong are all very active bosses. There really isn't a moment where they give you a breather, so when the bosses are extremely active and aggressive and you're constantly dodging around their attacks looking for openings, it gets really frustrating when you can only get a few hits in before you have to back away and start the whole dance over again. The amount of times that my flow state was interrupted because I literally couldn't attack or dodge gave me a full-on rogue streak in my hair. One thing I will say that eased this issue of a disruptive flow state was that for better and for worse, the dodge in this game is relatively safe. Even before I got the upgrades and armor bonuses to make it have more invincibility, there were a lot of moments, even in the opening tutorial boss fight with Erlang, where I sat there as I dodged an attack thinking, should I have dodged that? And then on some of the more aggravating boss fights, there were plenty of I know I dodged that moments. A lot of this feeling I chalked up to the boss fights themselves having some pretty jank hitboxes. Not all of them. In fact, a good majority of the bosses in the game have very well behaved hitboxes. It's just that the naughty bosses have some really egregious ones.
Jesus!
I had issues. But that about wraps up the negatives I had for this game, and onto the actual bright side of life. If I had to pick one word that came to mind constantly when I was playing this game, it was variety. The boss variety of this game is actually insane. I thought From Software was the king of boss variety after playing Shadow of the Erdtree, because, like, damn, they managed to make a hippo be a fun boss fight. But I think Game Science saw what From Software was cooking and said, hold my beer. Because this game has some of the weirdest boss fights this side of the West. You have Dragon with legs, Pig, Goopy Pig, a fight with 2 literal heads, Buddha's girlfriend, a very able monk, a better hippo, a literal demon, the king of the simps, and Frog. These guys also made actual spider boss fights with fully rigged and erratic giant spiders running around the arena and not... Wait, why is FromSoft catching strays right now? Anyway, there's some crazy boss variety, and out of the 107 bosses in the game, there's maybe 10 reskinned and reused bosses in the game, and even the reskinned frogs all have something unique to them that fits with the biome they were placed in. I don't know why they thought the need to have 3 reused stone poison guys in the last chapter. That was weird. I don't know. The visual presentation of the bosses and the rest of the game is also top-notch. While some of the phase transitions are a little lacking, the things I have seen, they are overall really well presented and characterized. I'm not joking when I say that this game has one of the best examples of characterization through gameplay. I have never been so disrespected and humbled in a boss fight in my life.
What? Did he? Hey! Hey! What the hell? Did he just gain health?
God damn, man, you did not have to do me like that. They all have mostly clear telegraphs and attacks that are all pretty easy to intuit what the boss is going to do, and make it so that you can first try a good majority of the bosses in this game. And then the hitbox porn is also off the charts, for better and for worse. The amount of times that I missed a parry because the hitboxes decided to play extra nice with me was confusing. As I said earlier, the bosses themselves are not really that hard. Their bark is a lot worse than their bite, and strangely, I'm okay with that. There was a healthy balance between actually challenging bosses and bosses that were mostly a walk in the park. Coming off the back of Shadow of the Erdtree, This was a pretty welcome change of pace. It also made bosses like Erlang, the Yellow Long, and all 3 Tiger fights, and the final boss stand out more because they were the finest tuned challenges of the game. Though I do have to say, the Yellow Long is a thief, bro, because I turned the game to performance mode in the middle of fighting him, and that dude stole so many of my frames that he sent me to the Shadow Realm for it. And he wasn't the only one, but minor grievances, continue with the positives. 2 massive contributors to the game being such a walk in the park is how great the control of the Destined One is and how the game did its skill tree.
Oh my goodness!
Big skill trees often look very menacing and daunting and full of useless stat boosts and upgrades, but this one is actually pretty straightforward, and every single skill of the ones I chose were useful. All of these skills only cost about 1 to 2 points, and you get skill points pretty quickly through the game, which gave me this really satisfying feeling of constant progression. Every level up felt meaningful because I was getting skills that made me stronger or actively affected my playstyle and build. Now add this skill tree to the Destined One's very quick and responsive moveset, the majority of which I could animation cancel into a dodge or magic ability, and I had access to a really solid set of tools to tackle the challenges with. The only attacks that can't be cancelled are the heavy attack and varied combo moves, which makes a lot of sense given that they are some of the highest damaging attacks in the game. If you thought it stopped with just the basic toolkit, you are mistaken though, as I had access to a pretty staggering amount of JoJo stands to mix up my playstyle even more. The JoJo stands come in 2 forms: full-on transformations and individual spirit attacks. This is where I expose how little I actually experimented with this side of the combat, because I am a certified no thoughts, head empty, bonk city enjoyer. I never swapped off of the Wandering White Spirit, so I have no idea how good any of the other spirits actually are. What I do know is how good and fun to use the transformations are, because I actually messed around with them. The transformations are kind of broken because they give you a whole ass separate health bar to work with, and also have a whole separate skill tree to upgrade that lets them do more damage, last longer, or have a shorter cooldown between uses. The transformations are also wholly unique and fully fleshed out movesets, all centered around the gimmicks of the boss fights that you got the transformation from. They add an extra layer of combat for status effects, but really I mainly just use them as a get out of jail free card whenever I panicked against certain boss fights. Overall, the game's combat is a package that was very well put together with scotch tape instead of duct tape. But despite the tape, it still delivered a pretty fun and engaging boss rush, and for a brand new team's first game, this is pretty impressive. I think I might actually have less to say about the narrative than I do the gameplay, and I think that's a big shame considering the source material the game is pulling from. I honestly didn't feel much going through this aside from, oddly, disappointment. Don't get me wrong, there's parts of the narrative that are really well presented and written, but I kept waiting for that moment when the main narrative would hit me and get me super invested, but that moment didn't really come. And that kinda sucks because I was locked in when the game started. The opening battle between Wukong and the armies of heaven was amazing. Like, chef's kiss, great introduction to who I thought would be our main character. Wukong is so richly characterized in this opening fight that it makes the first chapter almost lose all of its steam when the game reveals that the main goal of the narrative is to assemble all 5 pieces of Exodia as we play a new silent monkey protagonist. Genuinely, I think having a silent protagonist is what made the narrative feel so empty for a good chunk of it, because there was nothing extra to it. We were just doing this because we gotta get Wukong back. Admittedly, the promise of getting Wukong back was enough for me because he's such a cool character and I wanted to see more of him, but I was really let down by the fact that the Destined One was completely silent and barely had any personality to latch onto. Another thing about the main narrative, and this is a factor that will completely vary depending on your level of knowledge of the origins of the Journey to the West story, is that the main narrative of the game did confuse me at times. Granted, this is my first impressions, so this could also just be attributed to the fact that I'm a banana whose brown spots are getting to him, but there were moments in the story where things would happen for seemingly the first time that were supposed to already have happened in the world of Chinese mythology. Wukong's fight with the Army of Heaven is one of those things, along with the crown that gives him a migraine. The crown should already have been removed from his head, and we actually do see that it was removed from his head, so its inclusion is never really explained in a way I could find, and that left me really confused, and I still am confused about that, so yeah. Chapter 4 had me the most confused and let down of the bunch, as for the life of me, I cannot remember when the words 100-eyed Guai were even uttered, so I had no clue who the final boss of the chapter was, and that wasn't really a problem because I saw a big monster that needed to go down, so, I killed Big Monster. But I was a little let down that the spider ladies weren't the final challenge for the chapter, since we spent the entirety of that chapter building them up and fighting against them. The main narrative does have us come back full circle to Mount Huago, and it has a pretty strong finale where we learn the full tale of Wukong from the old man monkey who first sent us out to collect all 5 pieces of Exodia, and then he tells us to take Wukong's memory and become Wukong himself, and it's honestly a little anticlimactic. The game plays it off as a bit of a tragedy that we're about to give ourselves and our being to become a vessel for Wukong to return, and Pigsy is especially distraught by this, but I really couldn't find it in myself to care because we had such a silent protagonist who was devoid of so much personality that I just couldn't really get attached to him. So when the option to become Wukong was presented, I was going, yes, please, yes, I would like that very much. And I'm not opposed to silent protagonists. I like quite a few. Being silent doesn't mean that they have to lack personality, and just look at Jack from Jak and Daxter, or Ori in Ori and the Blind Forest. Both are completely silent, but have a personality for me to get attached to. Black Myth Wukong does a lot of telling us about the Destined One's personality, but then he has this one expression the entire game. Thank Buddha that the side characters and side narratives of this game are as fun and engaging as they are. Ah, the headless hick, my beloved. I'm not joking, these side characters are really intriguing to learn about, and I often found myself reading the lore descriptions for all of them. And as a narrative designer myself, I always make it a point to read all of the work that my fellow narrative designers do, but these were some of the few lore entries that really made me want to read even more, and that's a really impressive feat. And probably the part of these that made me want to read even more was the fact that the lore entries were written in a way that evokes the style of those Chinese myths. It made it so much more engaging to read because it wasn't just a wall of text expositing the backstory of a specific Yaoguai. It had a flow and a feel to it that gave off a real unique identity. The addition of Pigsy about halfway through the game also really bolsters the narrative, as it gave me someone with a consistent voice to listen to, and Pigsy's irreverent and boastful attitude is a really nice contrast to the majority of the characters in the game, who are interesting and fun in their own right because they have such interesting concepts behind them, but Pigsy just knows all the intimate details about the original journey to the west and what led up to Wukong's fight against Heaven, and all of the interactions between the characters that we meet after we get him, and it adds so much to the dynamic that it just kept me glued to the screen every time he was going off, and I loved him. But none of these elements come close to what is undoubtedly the strongest aspect of the narrative design and honestly the entire game: the music videos. These play at the end of every chapter, and every single one of these animated music videos is packed to the brim with storytelling so rich it almost gave me a brain ache. Each one will expand on the story of the final boss of the prior chapter or the theme of the next chapter, and most of the time these videos are just completely reliant on the visual and musical storytelling, and that is really what sets them apart. The animation is always beautiful, and each video has their own distinct and unique style that fits with the aesthetic of the chapter and will also lead you into the next chapter in a very simple and elegant way. One thing the Chapter 2 music video did, on top of being stop motion animated, which is really cool, and I love me some stop motion animation, but this was also a completely unexpected part of it, and it therefore made it my favorite quest and bit of narrative design in the game, and that was in Chapter 3, where I found the skin of a white fox, the same white fox from the Chapter 2 music video that was killed by a monk after being rescued and healed by him. The monk had a bad dream about the wolf, and so in fear, he killed it. In Chapter 3, that monk is revealed to be at the Thunderclap Temple, one of the major parts of that chapter, seeking enlightenment and atonement for what he did to the fox. The monk won't actually attack you if you approach him in your monkey form, and you can actually talk to him, but if you enter his chamber while transformed into the fox, he will attack you as the non-void boss fight. It's a really clever use of the music videos and tied it even further with the gameplay, and I really loved it and wished there was more of it going through, because that's such a fun and unique way to tie a side quest into the main narrative. And honestly, I think that sentiment right there perfectly describes my overall experience with Black Myth Wukong. It genuinely is a really fun journey to the west that I had a great time just cruising through the game and taking in the beautiful scenery, exceptionally animated boss fights, and stunning presentation, but there was always an itch of wanting more that I just could never scratch. Game Science did an incredible job on a first outing, and I really hope that they latch on to what made this game unique and continue to expand on those aspects in future titles, or even DLC. For now, my journey to the west is over, and I probably won't be starting a new one anytime soon. But I'm glad that I did start it, and I hope that you guys start your own. Hey guys, so that was the new video format. I don't know if I'm gonna keep doing it this way, but I had a good time kind of compiling my first raw experience of the game. I think I've figured out a different way that I'm gonna do it going forward, and this is kind of like the test run, so let me know if you guys enjoyed this. I have a different way that I'm thinking about doing it for games. Is like after every play session, I'll take some notes down and write down my thoughts, or write part of the script as soon as I finish playing a section of the game, so I can fully get those raw thoughts down, and maybe that could be the way the video goes. I don't know, like, I'm workshopping it. I like this. I had a lot of fun going through and building this up. The script did take me a bit because I was trying to figure out how I wanted to go about the video, and I honestly didn't want to make this one a particularly long one. Also workshopping some video scripts for Silent Hill 2 Remake that I'm actually playing right now on Twitch, if you guys want to check that out. It's scary, and I'm actually having a good time. It's weird. It's very kooky and weird, but yeah. Those are the videos that I have coming up, and I hope you guys enjoyed this format. I'm trying to workshop it more when I get that Silent Hill 2 video, and then, yeah, the choice one is going to be really fun. I'm really excited for that. I just finished replaying Ghost of Tsushima, so I'm very up on the, on the choices. So, yeah, thank you all for making it to the end of this video. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, all of the fun YouTuber things that we do to raise engagement, and I will see you all in the next one.